The moment I pulled into the driveway of my late uncle's house, a strange calm washed over me. It wasn't the usual relief of arriving at a new home after a long drive. This was heavier, like the air itself carried the weight of memories. The rental truck's engine ticked as it cooled, and I sat behind the wheel, staring at the front porch. The paint was chipped, but the beams stood sturdy, much like Uncle Henry. I could almost hear his gravelly laugh, see him wiping sawdust off his hands after a day in his workshop. This was his place, and now it was mine. The house sat on a quiet hill in Southern California, a sun-faded craftsman with a sloped lawn dotted with sycamores. A weathered wooden sign, half buried in weeds, read Canyon Crest Estates, founded 1963. But my property wasn't part of Canyon Crest. Uncle Henry had made sure of that, and it was a fact that would soon stir up more trouble than I could have imagined. I climbed out of the truck, the late morning sun warm on my neck, and opened the back to start unloading. My life's work was stacked inside. Oak tables I'd built by hand, a set of walnut shelves, and the prize of the Howla cedar chest with iron clasps, battered but proud. It had belonged to Uncle Henry, a relic of his life, carrying 4 decades of stories and stubbornness. I carried the chest to the porch, setting it down like it was a sacred artifact. The front door creaked when I pushed it open, just as it had when I was a kid visiting during summers. Inside, the air smelled of wood polish and old books. In the living room, I spotted a stack of cardboard boxes labeled Henry M. Personal. Curiosity tugged at me, and I pried one open. It was heavier than the others, stuffed with manila folders, newspaper clippings, black and white photos, and a yellowed map with red ink boundaries. Tucked in an envelope was a letter from the county archives, dated 1962. It confirmed Henry Mitchell had been a lead builder for what became the Canyon Crest Estates clubhouse. There were photos of him in overalls, hammer in hand, standing on scaffolding beside men in suits. He looked out of place, a craftsman among bureaucrats, and I chuckled at the thought. Then I found the real gem, a notarized letter from 1963 showing Henry had refused to join the newly formed Canyon Crest Homeowners Association. In the margins, in his blocky handwriting, he'd scrawled, "I built their damn clubhouse, but I'll be damned if they tell me how to live on my land." That was Uncle Henry, half carpenter, half rebel. I was still grinning at his defiance when a sharp voice cut through the quiet. "You can't park that truck there." I turned to see a woman storming across my lawn, clipboard in hand, blonde hair clipped into a severe bob. She was maybe in her late 50s, dressed in crisp athleisure and designer sunglasses, radiating the kind of authority that thrives in suburban committee rooms. I squinted against the sun. "Excuse me. This is HOA maintained property," she snapped, pointing at the edge of my driveway. "Per community regulations, large vehicles aren't allowed on weekends, especially not that." She waved at my U-Haul like it was a junkyard relic. I set down the table leg I was carrying. "Ma'am, I'm not part of your HOA. This is private land. Always has been." Her lips curled into a smile so tight it could have cracked glass. "Oh, I know this property. You must be Henry's nephew. I'm Linda Prescott, president of Canyon Crest HOA. That grass you're parked on is part of our perimeter zone. Move the truck." I held her gaze. "That perimeter zone is mine. The property line is marked by that stake. Check the county records if you want." She blinked, clearly in use to pushback, then muttered, "I'll be watching," before retreating. I shrugged and went back to unloading, figuring that was the end of it. I was wrong. 15 minutes later, 2 police cruisers rolled up, lights flashing but sirens off. Linda had called 911, reporting a male suspect stealing antique furniture from HOA common property. "Welcome to the neighborhood." The lead officer, a guy with a jaw like a brick and a stare that could make a saint feel guilty, stepped out. His hand rested near his holster, casual but deliberate. "Sir, we got a report of possible theft. Antique items removed from the HOA property." I raised my hands, trying to keep things light. "You mean the cedar chest? It's my uncle's. His initials are carved on the bottom. I inherited it with the house." Before he could respond, Linda marched back, heels clicking like a metronome. She held a glossy photo, clearly printed from some online catalog, showing a chest vaguely similar to mine in what looked like a community room. "That's it," she declared, waving the photo like a courtroom exhibit. "That chest was stolen from our clubhouse years ago. I always suspected foul play." I glanced at the photo. The chest had different hardware and a planar base, but Linda wasn't interested in details. To her, It was proof. The officer raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, do you have records? Police reports, insurance claims. Linda stiffened. We didn't file a report. It was presumed misplaced, but I know that chest, the grain, the patina. I pointed to the initials on my chest H.M. and said, that photo's from a catalog. I can prove this has been in my family for decades. Got documents inside. After some back and forth, the officers logged it as a property dispute and left, clearly not eager to referee an HOA spat. Linda shot me a look like I'd just keyed her car and stormed off. I thought that was the end of her crusade. It wasn't. That evening, my phone started buzzing. Notifications piled up, friends, old classmates, even a neighbor I hadn't met yet. Is this about you? One message read. I opened Facebook and found the Canyon Crest HOA group. Linda had posted, alert, suspicious individuals seen unloading furniture, possibly stolen from HOA clubhouse. The chest matches the item missing since 2018. Be vigilant. HOA cameras under review. The comments were a cesspool. Call the cops again. Probably squatting. He's got tools, might be a scavenger. Someone even posted a blurry ring cam photo of me carrying a table leg, captioned like I was breaking into my own house. I sat on the porch with a beer, trying to laugh it off, but the knot in my stomach wouldn't loosen. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It felt personal, like I'd inherited more than Uncle Henry's house side inherited his fight. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Susan Harper was in her mid-40s, with a sharp tongue and a reputation for making pompous types sweat. A friend swore she'd once reduced a golf club president to tears in court. That was good enough for me. I laid it out. HOA president accused me of theft, called the cops, and now she's smearing me online. Susan leaned back in her chair. We'll start with a cease and desist for defamation. Get me every document you have, deed, will, photos, anything proving the chest and property are yours. I spent the day digging through Uncle Henry's boxes. In one, I found a 1976 invoice from a woodworker in Fresno, billing Henry for cedar chest restoration, clasp repair, hand-carved initials. It was gold. Susan called it a legal sledgehammer. We sent the cease and desist to the HOA board that Friday, certified and dripping with legalese. I hoped it would cool things down. Instead, it lit a match. The cease and desist letter was supposed to be a warning shot, a way to put Linda Prescott and her HOA cronies on notice. Instead, it was like poking a hornet's nest with a stick. By Sunday morning, I realized this wasn't just about a cedar chest or a property line. Linda didn't just want control, she wanted me gone. It started with the mailbox. I stepped outside to grab the paper and found it ripped off its post, lying in the bushes with a crude snake spray painted across it in red. Not exactly subtle. I stared at it, my coffee going cold, and felt a slow burn in my chest. This was personal. The next night, my truck took a hit. I heard a faint thump after midnight but didn't think much of it until morning. 3 separate egg splatters decorated the hood, hard throws that left yolk dripping like a bad abstract painting. One egg hadn't broken and sat there mocking me. Across the street, a neighbor, some guy in a tucked-in polo with a permanent scowl, watched me scrub it off. He didn't blink, just stood there like a sentinel. I gave him a nod, but he turned away. Message received. Then came the nails. Tuesday morning, I backed out of the driveway, got maybe 10 feet, and heard the sickening pop-pop of tires deflating. 3-inch galvanized nails were scattered across the road like confetti, one standing upright, as if posing for a photo. I counted 8 in total, enough to ensure damage. My stomach churned as I called a tow truck. The police showed up, same officer from the chest incident, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I showed him the nails, the spray-painted mailbox, the egg stains still faintly visible on my truck. Any proof of who did this? He asked, pen hovering over his notepad. I pointed to the HOA's Facebook group, where Linda's post had racked up hundreds of comments, some openly calling for action against problem residents. He nodded, wrote a report, and said the HOA board denied involvement. No surprises there. That night, I installed motion sensor lights and 2 more security cameras. This wasn't just about being watched, I was being warned. But Linda wasn't done escalating. On Thursday, 4 HOA members, including Linda, showed up at my porch with a letter on official Canyon Crest Estates letterhead. It was a masterclass in passive-aggressive nonsense. Your possession of historically relevant items believed to be communal property is under review, it read. They demanded I temporarily surrender the cedar chest, plus a mahogany bookshelf and a hand-tooled desk for a committee evaluation. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. "Come and get it," I muttered under my breath. But the final paragraph stopped me cold. The HOA had filed a civil claim against me. Not theft that wouldn't hold up. Instead, Linda was suing, claiming the chest, bookshelf, and desk were highly similar in craftsmanship to items previously believed lost from the HOA's clubhouse and thus might be community property under implied stewardship. I called Susan Harper, my lawyer, and read her the letter. She let out a low whistle. "She's going for a reverse grab," Susan said. "If she can't scare you out, she'll bury you in legal fees and paperwork." Classic bully move. I nodded, but my gut twisted. This wasn't just petty anymore. It was a calculated attack. Behind the eggs, the nails, and the smug Facebook posts, Linda was building a war machine, and I was the target. I spent the next day fortifying my defenses: more cameras, a reinforced gate lock, and a deep dive into Uncle Henry's papers. I found another gem, a 1978 photo of Henry standing beside the cedar chest in his workshop, the same initials, M. visible. It wasn't just proof, it was a middle finger to Linda's claims. But the real blow came on Thursday morning. I'd gone to the hardware store for supplies: wood glue, clamps, enough sandpaper to refinish a barn. When I got back around 10:30, the side gate was swinging open. That gate was always locked. My heart kicked into gear. I parked fast and jogged to the house, praying the cameras had caught something. At the front door, I froze. The cedar chest had been moved, just a foot, but the scuff marks on the porch were fresh. One of the iron clasps was bent, like someone had tried to pry it open. My hands shook as I unlocked the door and stormed to my office to check the security feed. There he was, clear as day on the front-facing camera. A man in his 60s, balding, wearing a tan jacket and black gloves, in May, in Southern California. He'd let himself in through the gate like he owned the place, pulled a slim tool from his Kawada lockpick, or bump key and jimmied the front door. 30 seconds later, he was inside. For 10 minutes, he prowled my living room, inspecting furniture like an appraiser at an estate sale. He ran his hands over the chest, the bookshelf, even the desk I'd moved to the garage. He snapped photos with a small camera, squatting to examine the joints of one of my oak tables. The guy moved with precision, no hesitation, like he was cataloging property he already claimed. Then, just before he left, he did something that made my blood boil. He slapped a small white sticker under the cedar chest. I paused the footage and zoomed in. The sticker read, "Canyon Crest HOA Catalog, Preliminary Identification. CC03 LP. LP. Linda Prescott." This wasn't some random busybody. Linda had sent someone into my home, without permission, to tag my family's heirloom like it was HOA inventory. I called the police and didn't mince words. Someone broke into my house, tampered with my property, and left evidence tying it to the HOA president. When the officers arrived, I showed them everything: the footage, the scuff marks, the bent clasp, the sticker. Officer Ramirez, a new face, recognized the man in the video. "That's Ronald Carver," he said. "Used to run a liquidation business. Lost his license years ago for shady practices. He shouldn't be assessing anything, let alone breaking into homes." They dusted the chest for prints, bagged the sticker as evidence, and filed a report for unlawful entry and attempted theft. For the first time, it felt like the tide might be turning. But Linda had one more card to play. That night, a newsman pulled UPA local channel that thrived on neighborhood drama. A reporter, all smiles and hairspray, knocked on my door while her cameraman fiddled with his mic. "We're doing a story on a property dispute," she chirped. "Care to comment on the antique chest believed to have been recovered from the HOA archives?" I stared, dumbfounded. "What are you talking about?" She flipped open a binder with a printed HOA statement claiming a historically significant furniture item, thought lost during the 2018 clubhouse remodel, has been visually confirmed at a nearby residence and will be subject to property review. My voice dropped low, the kind of tone you don't mess with. "Get off my property. Now." They left, but the segment aired at 6 p.m. Linda stood at the end of my driveway, looking like she was posing for a campaign ad, telling the reporter, "Sometimes lost things come home in unexpected ways." I watched it on my laptop, my jaw tight. This wasn't about a chest or a desk. It was about power, and Linda was wielding it like a club. I called Susan. "File everything," I said. "Defamation, harassment, trespass. No more waiting." Her voice was steady. "Good. Let's bury them." Linda Prescott's news segment was like a match tossed into dry grass. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing with notifications, neighbors, old friends, even a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. The Canyon Crest HOA Facebook group was a war zone, with Linda's post about my stolen chest pinned at the top and comments piling up like debris after a storm. "He's disrespecting our community heritage," one read. Another, "Why is he so secretive? Probably hiding something." A few were uglier, hinting I didn't belong in their neighborhood. I shut off my phone and took a long breath on the porch, the cedar chest gleaming under the morning sun. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about Uncle Henry's legacy, and I wasn't going to let Linda rewrite it. Susan Harper, my lawyer, was already moving. "We're not just defending," she said over the phone, her voice sharp as a blade. "We're hitting back. Defamation, harassment, trespass, and we'll throw in emotional distress for good measure. Linda's built a house of cards, and we're bringing a wrecking ball." I spent the day gathering more evidence. Screenshots of the HOA's Facebook posts, the news segment clip, photos of the spray-painted mailbox, the egg truck, and the nails that cost me 2 new tires. The security footage of Ronald Carver breaking in was the crown jewel, and Susan called it a prosecutor's dream. But Linda wasn't slowing down. On Friday, 2 men showed up at my door, one in cargo shorts and mirrored sunglasses, the other built like he bench-pressed SUVs for fun. They handed me an envelope and left without a word. Inside, on Canyon Crest HOA letterhead, was an invitation to a special session to revisit board leadership and reassess community boundary concerns. Attached was a roster of board members, including a new name, Richard T. Gorman, Lot 52. I drove by Lot 52 that afternoon. The house was empty, no cars, no trash cans, curtains taped shut. Yet somehow, it had voting rights. I called Susan. She snorted. "Classic. That's her cousin or some stooge. She's padding the board with ghost votes to rig the meeting. I've seen this trick before." She paused, then added, "You should go. Not for her, for the audience. Let her overplay her hand." The idea of walking into the HOA's lion's den didn't thrill me, but Susan was right. Linda was banking on me staying quiet. So I went, not for peace, but to see how far she'd push this. The meeting was held at the Canyon Crest Community Center, a squat building with fluorescent lights and folding chairs arranged like a courtroom. Word had spread, and the room was packed. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in years sat shoulder to shoulder, whispering. Some shot dirty looks at Linda's usual allies. Others just watched, waiting for the show. I took a seat near the back, my stomach tight, but my resolve ironclad. Linda swept in wearing a crimson blazer, flanked by her newly minted board members. She smiled like a talk show host, welcoming the crowd before launching her attack. "In light of ongoing disputes and the presence of historically ambiguous items," she said, her voice dripping with fake sincerity, "I propose we formally revisit leadership roles and conduct a full integration review of adjacent properties." The room shifted. Everyone heard the subtext. She wanted my land, my chest, and my silence, all wrapped up in HOA jargon. I stood, my voice steady. "Curious how your newest board member, Richard Gorman, has never been seen at Lot 52. I drove by yesterday. No mailbox name, no lights, nothing. Unless he's a ghost, I'd like to meet him." Linda's smile faltered, but before she could respond, a voice cut through the room like a whip. "He's her cousin. Lives in Arizona." Heads turned. It was Ellen Carter, the former HOA treasurer, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with a stare that could melt steel. She stood, clutching a stack of papers. Linda filed a fake lease in his name to stack the board. I resigned when I caught her pulling stunts like this for months. The crowd murmured. Linda tried to interrupt, her voice rising. "This is out of order." Ellen didn't flinch. "I brought the emails." She held up the papers, and the room erupted in gasps and whispers. One board member, a nervous-looking guy in a golf shirt, slid his badge onto the table and walked out. The vote was called, and it was brutal. 28 residents present, 22 against Linda's leadership, 4 abstained, 2 in favor, 1 being an empty chair. Linda stood frozen, her blazer suddenly looking like a costume. She adjusted it, gave me a look that could have curdled milk, and walked out. No tantrum, no speech, just silence. But I knew this wasn't over. The next week was quiet, too quiet. I kept working in my workshop, sanding tables and polishing the cedar chest, but the air felt charged, like the calm before a thunderstorm. Susan was building our case, and I sent her everything. The 1976 invoice, the 1978 photo, even a letter from Uncle Henry's old woodworking buddy confirming the chest was custom-made. But Linda's silence unnerved me. Bullies don't just quit, and she'd already proven she played dirty. Then it happened. On a Wednesday morning, I got a call from a neighbor, Tom, who lived 2 streets over. "You see the news?" he asked. I hadn't, but my gut sank. I pulled up the local channel's website and found it. Another segment, this time framed as a community heritage dispute. Linda was front and center, standing outside the HOA clubhouse, claiming the cedar chest was a lost artifact from Canyon Crest's founding, wrongfully removed, and now at the center of a legal battle. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. The camera panned to my house, my truck, and my porch. The reporter's voiceover called it a story of tradition versus outsiders. I slammed my laptop shut. This wasn't just defamation, it was a public lynching. Neighbors started texting, some supportive, others asking if I was really stealing HOA property. One message from an unknown number read, "Leave before it gets worse." I forwarded it to Susan, who was already drafting a motion to include the news segment in our lawsuit. "She's desperate," Susan said. "This is her last stand. Keep your cameras on." I did more than that. I upgraded my security system with night vision and cloud backups, and I started parking my truck in the garage. Good thing, too, because the next night, someone threw a brick through my workshop window. It landed inches from the cedar chest, shattering a lamp. The cameras caught a figure in a hoodie, too blurry to ID, but the message was clear. Linda's allies weren't done. I called the police again, showed them the footage, the brick, the threatening text. They filed another report, but without a clear face, there wasn't much they could do. The pressure was getting to me. I wasn't sleeping well, and every creak in the house made me jump. But I wasn't backing down. Uncle Henry had fought these people decades ago, and I wasn't going to let his stand be for nothing. I started reaching out to neighbors, quietly, over coffee or in their driveways. Some were scared to talk, worried about Linda's influence, but others were fed up. Ellen Carter was a goldmine, sharing years of dirt on Linda's tactic, misused funds, rigged votes, even fining people for petty things like unapproved flower beds. "She's run this place like her personal kingdom," Ellen said. "You're just the first to fight back." By the end of the week, Susan called with news. "We've got a court date," she said. 3 weeks. Judge Raymond Holt, tough but fair. Linda's lawyer is scrambling. They know we've got the upper hand. I felt a flicker of hope, but it was tempered by dread. Linda wasn't the type to go quietly, and I had a feeling her next move would be her boldest yet. The weeks leading up to the court date felt like wading through molasses. Every day brought a new jab from Linda Prescott's camp. The HOA's Facebook group stayed active, with anonymous accounts posting veiled threats like, "Some people don't know when to quit," and blurry photos of my house at dusk, captioned, "Watching." I stopped reading the comments but kept screenshots for Susan Harper, who was building a case so airtight it could have survived a hurricane. The brick through my workshop window was the last physical attack, but the psychological warfare was relentless. Neighbors I'd never met crossed the street to avoid me, while others left casseroles on my porch with notes saying, "Keep fighting." It was like living in a town split down the middle, and I was the fault line. Susan and I spent hours preparing. She had me walk her through every detail, the cedar chest's history, Uncle Henry's documents, the break-in by Ronald Carver, the nails in my driveway, the news segments. We had the 1976 invoice, the 1978 photo, and an affidavit from Henry's old woodworking friend, plus the security footage and police reports. Ellen Carter, the former HOA treasurer, was our star witness, ready to spill years of dirt on Linda's reign. "This isn't just about you," Susan said, her eyes glinting. "We're dismantling her empire." But Linda wasn't idle. A week before the trial, the HOA sent another letter, this time offering to settle if I surrendered the cedar chest and paid $5,000 for community restoration. I laughed it off, but Susan saw it for what it was, a Hail Mary. "She's scared," Susan said. "Her lawyer knows they're on thin ice." Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Linda had one last trick up her sleeve. The courthouse was a low, beige building that looked designed to bore you into submission, but inside, it crackled with tension. The bailiff called our case Mitchell v. Prescott et al., and my name echoed like a starting gun. I took my seat beside Susan, my palms sweaty but my resolve iron. Linda swept in, draped in a charcoal gray suit, her face a mask of calm arrogance. Her lawyer, a wiry man named Gerald Vance with slicked-back hair and a permanent smirk, shuffled papers like he was playing poker. Susan, in a crisp navy blazer, looked like she could eat him for breakfast. Behind us, The gallery was packed. Neighbors, reporters, even a few HOA board members who jumped ship after Linda's ousting. Ellen Carter sat in the front row, her folder of evidence taking up its seat. Judge Raymond Holt was a former prosecutor with a voice like gravel and a no-nonsense demeanor that could silence a room. He leaned forward, peering over his glasses. "Let's keep this clean, counselors. No theatrics." Susan stood, her presence commanding. "Your Honor, this isn't a property dispute. It's a coordinated campaign of harassment, defamation, unlawful entry, and abuse of power. My client, Mr. Mitchell, inherited his uncle's property and heirlooms. In response, Ms. Prescott launched a smear operation, culminating in an unauthorized break-in and an attempt to seize his property without legal basis." Gerald Vance jumped up, muttering about unsubstantiated accusations, but Judge Holt waved him off. "Ms. Harper, show me the evidence." She did. The courtroom screen lit up with the security footage of Ronald Carver strolling through my house, inspecting furniture, and slapping the HOA sticker on the cedar chest. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Susan narrated like a documentary filmmaker, detailing each escalation: the false theft report, the Facebook posts, the news segments, the brick through my window. She entered the sticker into evidence, along with the forged lease for Linda's cousin, Richard Gorman, and Ellen's emails exposing Linda's vote rigging. It was a masterclass in precision, each piece locking into place like a puzzle. Linda took the stand next, her voice syrupy with fake sincerity. She claimed she was protecting Canyon Crest heritage, that the chest was a community treasure she'd misidentified in good faith. "I never authorized any break-in," she said, her eyes wide. "It was a misunderstanding." Susan didn't let her breathe. "Did you not label Mr. Mitchell's chest as HOA property?" she asked, holding up a printout of Linda's Facebook post. "And did you not call the police, accusing him of theft?" Linda faltered. "It was an honest mistake." "And the sticker?" Susan stepped closer, her voice like a scalpel. "Was that a mistake, too? Because unless your HOA tags private property as a hobby, that looks like attempted theft." Linda glanced at her lawyer, who stayed silent. "Smart move." Ellen Carter took the stand next, and her testimony was a bombshell. She laid out Linda's history, misusing HOA funds for personal projects, fining residents for minor infractions, and manipulating votes to stay in power. "I stayed quiet too long," Ellen said, her voice catching. "But I won't let her weaponize this community against an innocent man." The gallery murmured, and Judge Holt's pen scratched furiously. The judge called a recess, and I stepped outside for air. Neighbors approached, some offering handshakes, others whispering support. But I saw Linda's allies in the corner, glaring like I'd burned their clubhouse down. The tension was thick, and I knew the ruling would either end this or ignite a bigger fight. When we reconvened, Judge Holt didn't waste time. His voice cut through the room like a hatchet. "This court finds that Ms. Prescott engaged in a prolonged, malicious campaign against Mr. Mitchell. Her actions include defamation, trespass via proxy, abuse of HOA governance, and false claims to property." He turned to Linda, who sat rigid. "You will pay damages of $135,000 to Mr. Mitchell, covering compensatory and punitive damages, plus full legal fees." The gallery buzzed. Linda's shoulders slumped, her composure cracking. But Holt wasn't done. "Given the evidence of unlawful entry and fraudulent manipulation of board authority, this matter is forwarded to the district attorney for criminal review, including your role in orchestrating an unauthorized entry into a private home. You are also prohibited from serving on any HOA board for 10 years. Linda's lawyer whispered something, and her face drained of color. I caught her lips forming one word: jail. Judge Holt fixed her with a final stare. "You weaponized community power for a personal vendetta. Now you face the consequences." As Linda was led out, the room hummed with whispers. Neighbors exchanged stunned looks. Reporters scribbled furiously. Linda Prescott, self-proclaimed Queen of Canyon Crest, had been dethroned, her empire reduced to rubble by her hubris and a cedar chest. I walked outside, the sun hitting my face like a benediction. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. But the victory wasn't just mine. The neighborhood was shifting. Ellen Carter stepped up as interim HOA president, and she didn't waste time. At the next meeting, she proposed new bylaws, term limits for board members, transparent budgets, and a clause banning unapproved property interventions, a polite way of saying, don't touch your neighbor's stuff. The residents voted it through unanimously, a quiet rebellion against Linda's reign. I spent the next few days in my workshop, polishing the cedar chest until it gleamed. I ordered a brass plaque and had it engraved, inherited and defended in court. When I bolted it on, it felt like closing a chapter. The chest wasn't just a family heirloom Anna Maria, it was a symbol, a line in the sand. Neighbors started dropping by, some to see the famous chest, others to share their own stories of HOA overreach. One guy brought his teenage daughter, saying, "I want her to meet the man who stood up to the HOA queen." I laughed, but it meant something. I wasn't just Henry's nephew anymore. I was part of this place. The courtroom victory over Linda Prescott felt like the end of a long, bruising war, but the echoes of the fight lingered in Canyon Crest Estates. The $135,000 judgment was a lifeline, covering my legal fees, the damage to my truck, and the sleepless nights spent wondering if I'd lose everything Uncle Henry had left me. More than the money, though, was the weight lifted from my shoulders. For the first time since I'd pulled into the driveway with that U-Haul, I could walk outside without scanning for spray paint or suspicious cars. But I wasn't naive. Wounds like these don't heal overnight, and a neighborhood doesn't shake off years of fear just because one tyrant falls. Linda's downfall was the talk of the town. Word spread that she'd sold her house at a loss, packing up her crimson blazers and fleeing to Nevada, not Arizona as some rumors claimed. A neighbor swore they saw her real estate listing online, with a note about seeking a fresh start. Last I heard, she'd applied for a board position at a retirement community and was politely shown the door. The irony wasn't lost on Melinda, who'd ruled Canyon Crest like a dictator, couldn't even snag a seat at a condo association. Justice, it turns out, has a sense of humor. The HOA itself was undergoing a quiet revolution. Ellen Carter, now interim president, was a force of nature. She didn't just rewrite the bylaws, she gutted the rot that had festered under Linda. Term limits were capped at 2 years, budgets were posted online for all to see, and the new no property intervention clause became a local legend. Ellen called it the Mitchell Rule at a community meeting, and the room broke into applause. I ducked my head, embarrassed but proud. The cedar chest, still sitting proudly in my workshop with its brass plaque, inherited and defended in court, had become more than an heirloom. It was a symbol of standing up, of saying enough when power turns cruel. My workshop turned into a gathering spot. Neighbors I'd never met stopped by, some to admire the chest, others to share stories of their battles with HOAs or overzealous bureaucrats. One woman, a retired teacher named Margaret, brought me a homemade pie and a letter she'd written to her own HOA, refusing to pay a fine for her unapproved birdhouse. "I read about you in the paper," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Told them to shove it." They backed off. I laughed, slicing into the pie. It was blueberry, and it tasted like victory. But the real triumph came on the 4th of July. I decided to host a barbecue in the yard, the kind Uncle Henry used to throw when I was a kid. I set up tables under string lights, filled coolers with beer and soda, and fired up the grill. The smell of burgers and hot dogs filled the air as kids ran through the grass, chasing each other with sparklers. Neighbors brought side dishes: potato salad, coleslaw, even a questionable Jell-O mold that nobody touched. The night was warm, the sky clear, and laughter cut through the darkness like fireworks. It felt like the neighborhood was breathing again, free from the shadow of Linda's clipboard. At one point, a new resident, a guy named Carl who'd moved in a month earlier, wandered over to the workshop. He spotted the cedar chest, read the plaque, and turned to me with a grin. "This is the one?" he asked, jerking his thumb at it. I nodded, leaning against the workbench with a beer in hand. "Yep." "Damn," he said. "Thought it'd be bigger." I chuckled, taking a swig. "Nah, just heavy enough to bury a tyrant's career." He laughed, and we clinked bottles. As I turned back to the grill, flipping burgers and joking with Ellen about her new "no Jell-O at meetings" rule, I realized something. This wasn't just a party. It was a reclaiming. Canyon Crest wasn't perfect. Neighbors still argued over fence heights and loud dogs, but the fear was gone. People looked out for each other now, not over their shoulders. And I was part of that, not as an outsider, but as someone who'd fought for this place. The chest itself became a local legend. A couple from the next town over visited, asking if I'd sell a replica. "We love the story," they said. I told them I only make originals, but I gave them a tour of the workshop and let them take a photo with the chest. A high school history teacher emailed, asking if she could bring her class to see it as part of a lesson on local history and standing up to injustice. I said yes, as long as they didn't touch the tools. The chest wasn't just mine, Anna Maria. It belonged to everyone who'd ever been pushed around and refused to back down. Months later, I got a letter from the district attorney's office. Linda was facing charges for orchestrating the break-in, along with fraud for her vote-rigging scheme. Ronald Carver, the ex-liquidator, had cut a deal, spilling everything in exchange for leniency. I didn't care much about the detail, jail or no jail. Linda was done. Her name was a punchline now, a cautionary tale whispered at HOA meetings across the county. The DA's letter ended with a note. Your evidence was critical to this case. Thank you. I tucked it into a drawer, next to Uncle Henry's old photos. Sometimes, I'd sit in the workshop at night, the cedar chest lit by a single bulb, and think about Henry. He'd been a craftsman, a loner, a man who'd built half this neighborhood but refused to bow to its rules. I wondered what he'd say about all this: the cops, the lawsuits, the barbecue that felt like a family reunion. Probably something like, told you they'd try to take it. Keep your hammer handy. I'd smile, running my hand over the chest's smooth grain, and feel him there, stubborn as ever. The neighborhood kept changing. Ellen stayed on as president, elected officially in a landslide. She invited me to join the board, but I declined. I'm better with a saw than a gavel, I said. She laughed, but didn't push. Instead, she asked me to build a new sign for the community center, one that read Canyon Crest Estates, built by neighbors, not rules. I carved it from oak, and when it was unveiled, the crowd cheered. Margaret, the pie lady, winked at me. Bet Linda's rolling over in Nevada. Life settled into a rhythm. I took on more woodworking projects, selling tables and shelves to folks who heard about the chest guy. The workshop hummed with sawdust and possibility, and the cedar chest stayed at its heart, a quiet reminder of what it means to stand your ground. I didn't think about Linda much anymore. She was a ghost, and ghosts don't scare you when you've got a community behind you. Looking back, the fight wasn't just about a chest or a property line. It was about what happens when power turns cruel, when one person decides they can control everyone else. Linda thought she could bully me out of my home, rewrite my family's story, and bend Canyon Crest to her will. But she forgot something. People pushed back. Uncle Henry did. I did. And now the whole neighborhood was doing it. One casserole, one vote, one sparkler at a time. As I write this, I'm sitting on my porch, the same one where I first set down the cedar chest. The sycamores are turning gold, and kids are riding bikes down the hill, their laughter carried on the breeze. I'm not saying it's perfect. There'll always be disputes, always be someone who thinks they can rule the roost. But Canyon Crest is different now. We're not just neighbors, we're a community, forged in the fire of one hell of a fight. I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a bully like Linda, someone who used power to intimidate or control? Maybe it was an HOA, a boss, or even a neighbor. How did you handle it? Did you fight back, or did you find another way? Share your stories in the comments, and let's talk about what it means to stand up to injustice. This isn't just my story, it's ours.